Hi there, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. I'm Nate Eaton. It is July 31st, 2025. Can you believe it's the last day of the month? I cannot. In fact, I cannot believe that it was actually 2 years ago tonight when I was doing a Courtroom Insider about Lori Vallow Daybell going away for life because she was sentenced 2 years ago today in Fremont County, Idaho. This was the one where people spent the night out on the lawn and the courtroom was packed and every media outlet was there. Anyway, Lori tonight, as far as we know, remains in the Maricopa County Jail, still in Arizona, awaiting extradition back to the state of Idaho. And she will, once that happens, she will live the rest of her life at the Idaho State Prison in Pocatello. So that's where she is tonight. We're not going to talk about her tonight, but we'll talk about some other interesting things. I'd love to know, by the way, where you're watching from. And if you have any questions, I will try to get to as many of those as I can. We have some fascinating guests tonight. The police chief of the Moscow Police Department, Anthony Dahlinger, is here, and so is Jeff Nye with the Idaho Attorney General's office. They are both going to talk about their involvement in the Bryan Kohberger investigation. It's fascinating to me because, of course, this happened in a small town, northern Idaho town, with a limited small police department. And then the Attorney General got involved, the FBI got involved, the Idaho State Police got involved. It was still a county case. It was still a Latah County case, but all these other agencies came in to help. And we're going to walk us through that. Plus, I'm going to ask them if they believe there's other evidence out there. And if this had gone to trial, would we have learned more from Kohberger? Get their thoughts on both of those questions. So stay tuned. That'll be in just a minute. Before we get to that, I want to go over a couple of news items that have broken this week in connection to the case. Some background. What happens is when these things go to trial, all of the police documents, prosecutor documents, all of the things that are considered public record are under, they can't be released because it's under investigation until the trial is over. Now that the trial is not happening, they can be released. However, the judge has said that the court documents, which we're waiting to get from the court, he's going to go through those bit by bit by bit and probably release them a little bit at a time. But you still have police records and you still have prosecutor records that those agencies are releasing. And the prosecutor has released a bunch of stuff, including this video that was going to be shown at Kohberger's trial. This was taken in August of 2022 when he was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. The prosecutor intended to introduce this video, and the judge allowed it in, was going to allow it in, to show that Bryan Kohberger had the same phone number as the person associated with the crime, and text messages and things like that, the cell phone pings, that it was the same number as the number he gave to the police during this traffic stop. Also, the fact that he drove a white Hyundai Elantra. The entire video is 8 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing. Here's just a clip.
Hey there. I stopped you going a little fast. You didn't realize this is 35?
Oh, it's 35?
It is, yeah. So you go...
about 41?
Yeah, 43 is what the radar said.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. Do you have your license, the registration, insurance? Were you wearing your seatbelt when I stopped you?
No.
No? That's no good.
Right. Just being honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You guys are... There's absolutely no point in not being honest.
Yeah.
You have a radar.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a vehicle registration slip or something like that? Okay.
But I give you my insurance.
Yeah, this is your insurance. That's good. Thing is, I'm on a overtime shift right now. One of the conditions is we have to enforce seatbelt laws, and so to write you a citation for that, it's $10 in Idaho. Not a huge deal, but yeah. Be right back. All right, sir. Here's your license back. It's here. Just an infraction citation. The only thing you're alleging failure to wear your seatbelt on the traffic stop. Like I said, the fine at that's $10. You do have the right to a hearing on this if you'd like one. If you'd like hearing, you need to request it before September 8th at 8:30. Otherwise, they'll automatically be entered against you. You'll lose the right to the hearing. I just wanted to pay it. The mailing address there, website right there.
Yeah, I just have a question about that. So in terms of when you get a speeding ticket that's obviously reported to your insurance is the same thing with the seatbelt?
I don't think so. I think it's only moving violations that go to insurance, or things that might put points on your license.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Could I get a phone number from you?
Yeah, why?
We need to put it on the citation as it goes to the court. Thank you.
And just for future reference, I mean, I'm obviously an honest person, right? I told you I wasn't wearing my safety belt. When people lie to you about that, like say I lied to you about that, right? Just for my own knowledge. Do you honestly go back and look at that, or do you just...
With a seatbelt like this, I didn't check as I was coming up, so that's why I asked you.
Do you usually?
I should. I noticed you weren't wearing it, and I'm on this emphasis, and like I said, I'm getting paid by ICD, and they want us to enforce the seatbelt law, so I was being more aware of that.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Have a good night.
So that was just a clip of the video. Now, the other interesting thing to me that I found was this right here behind me. The prosecutor had a model built of the home on King Road, around 4 feet tall. It was built to show the jurors what this home was like. And you can see from different angles. You've got the side panel, the overview of the home, the back side of the home. And this would show the jurors a layout. Let me take this in full so you can see it. So there's the back side, or the front side, I should say. There's the back side. There's the overview top. Imagine the prosecutor was going to walk through the jurors as far as who was in which room. And then, of course, the other side of the house there, the front side. So the home has since been torn down. The university tore it down. And then the prosecutor was going to use this. And the Judge Hippler, said that this would be allowed in. He had no issue with it being allowed in as a demonstrative exhibit, meaning it's not evidence. It's a demonstration for the jurors to help understand. The defense fought against it. The defense did not want it in, but the judge allowed it in. Another thing he allowed in, and I got to give kudos to the Idaho Statesman, Kevin Fixler at the Statesman, Alex Brizzi, Sally Krutzvig, some other reporters have been doing an amazing job going through all of these documents, thousands of pages. There was another thing that was released, Kohberger's thesis, a paper he wrote in one of his classes about a crime scene. This was before the murders were committed. Remember, he studied criminology. He was getting his PhD in that. And the judge allowed in that paper. The defense, again, fought against it, but the judge was going to allow it in. I'm not going to take the time to go through that paper. If you go to the Statesman, though, you can find it on there. And actually, they actually posted the paper that Bryan Kohberger wrote. So anyway, those are some developments in it this week, along with some interviews. The prosecutor has been a few different places giving interviews, and there's been other news in the case. But for now, I want to get straight to my interview with the chief of the Moscow Police Department, Anthony Dahlinger. Now, this is a chief who was working for the department when the crime happened. He was not yet the chief. The chief retired, the former chief retired, I believe, last year. And so then this guy stepped in to be the chief. And I got to talk with him about what this did to the department, what it was like responding that day. He was off that day and got a phone call to go in and help. And anyway, here is my interview with Chief Anthony Dahlinger. Chief, why don't we start off with how is the feeling now, I guess, with you and your team, the fact that the case has come to an end, plea agreements done, and now the Bryan Kohberger's in prison for life?
Yeah, it's still a bit surreal. It's starting to sink in slowly that we've kind of come to the end of this conclusion. And, for some, obviously, it's never going to end. The families involved in this and the loss of their loved ones will never go away. But we are excited that the outcome is finished and that he is being held accountable for his crimes.
What type of, toll does this take on a smaller department, a case like this? I mean, what type of resources and manpower does it take to have suddenly this massive case that not only is it big for your community and the families, but the whole world is watching?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we are a relatively small agency. It's all hands on deck when a major event like this happens. And of course, as we've explained to everyone, we couldn't have done it without our partners in the FBI, the Idaho State Police, Pennsylvania State Police, and all the personnel that came to our aid to help us through that investigation. It was truly a team effort, and it was a wonderful thing to be a part of is in that regard.
What would you say has been kind of the biggest thing you've learned during this case?
The biggest thing are you talking about specifically the investigation
Yeah,
or
with the investigation.
um I guess from an agency standpoint, when we're talking about lessons learned, one area that we were a bit deficient was our preparation for our communications with the media and the public. We, again, small agency, smaller town, didn't expect this to ever happen here, but then for it to turn into an international event in the media was completely off our radar. So we were ill-equipped for preparing and being able to handle that right out the gate. And again, we relied heavily on our partners who came to our aid in that regard as well and helped us to get that under control and move forward. It was a big lesson learned there.
Now, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, your predecessor retired a few years ago, right after this case broke, right?
Chief Fry retired, let's see, it would have been April of 24.
Oh,
I was,
okay.
yep.
And what were you doing before that? Were you with the department?
Yes, I was at the time of this event, I was the captain over our services division.
Okay. And did you always want to be a police chief? Is this something that you had aspired to, or is it something that you've thought, oh, I'll put my name in, or did they ask you to do it, the city?
Yeah, throughout my career, from day one, I've never aspired that someday I will be a chief. I never had that kind of a mindset. It's just throughout my career, opportunities came available, and I felt that I could be more impactful and help my agency and help my community better in different areas. And so when this opportunity came around, I thought to myself the very same thing I've asked myself every time I promoted is this the right time for me? Am I the right person for the job? Do I feel like I can be impactful? Can I make a difference? Can I make improvements where I feel they need to be made? And the answers were yes to many of those questions. And so I was approached by our city mayor about my potential for the position, and I accepted his appointment. And luckily, the city council also agreed with him, and that's how I got in the position I am now.
Were you at all a little apprehensive or nervous knowing that this was such a big case that you're now the leader of the department as this is getting ready to go to trial?
Absolutely. Not only that, but just being the leader of an agency is quite a daunting task. And I was wondering whether or not I was completely ready for it. But, I think what assisted me in that way was the fact that I was a part of the command staff during this incident. I was heavily involved from day one throughout the investigation and helping Chief Fry push the agency through and lead through this incident. So I felt like that did give me some experience to prepare me for the future.
Chief, do you remember the day that you guys got the call? Like, were you working that day? Can you kind of walk me through what your initial involvement was with when this whole case broke?
Yeah, it was a Sunday. I was at home. I was actually sitting on my couch watching a little television. I was preparing to leave within an hour or so to go to a friend's birthday celebration. And my phone rang. I saw it was work. And of course, when you're a command staff and you get a phone call on the weekend, it's usually not something great. But never expected to hear on the other end of the line what I heard that we had not only had a homicide, but it was a quadruple homicide. And my initial reaction was one of a bit of disbelief. And but when a call comes in like that, we just get ready and we go in. And like I said, small agency like us, it was every hand on deck. And so I changed my clothes and went right to the scene.
Wow. And you've been working on it every day since.
Yep.
So when those initial days of the investigation, you're obviously gathering evidence, trying to figure out what happened. Was it what was the feeling like, the fact that you didn't have a suspect right away, that you couldn't get the suspect and that it wasn't known it wasn't an obvious answer as to who did this?
Sure. I mean, obviously that adds a layer of difficulty. Luckily, here in our area, we have a very low violent crime rate. I mean, we've had homicides in the past, but they are more or less few and far between. And in the last few that I've been involved with prior to this case, we were able to identify a suspect immediately and knew where the direction that we were going. So certainly, this one was a bit different because it was at the onset a whodunit. And we were starting from literally ground zero and working our way through the investigation. So it definitely added a layer of complexity that we hadn't had.
I would imagine the other complex thing is when tips start pouring in. I'm sure the majority of them mean to be helpful, but they might not be. But then you also get ones that are completely far out there from different people. How do you as an agency sort through all those to find the valid ones versus the ones that you don't need to spend any time on?
Yeah, so our procedure for the tips that came in during this incident, again, leaning on our partners at the FBI, utilizing some of their strategies on that and their analysts. So we would receive those tips. They would come in, they would be parsed out to different investigators to then scroll through them and look at the legitimacy or potential legitimacy of them. Because as you said, some of them were quite far out there and something that maybe didn't need follow up. But that was part of the process, looking at which ones that we needed to prioritize, which ones we needed to act upon immediately, which ones we could maybe wait a little while. And then each one of those were divvied out to a different investigator to do follow up on, whether that's an interview or looking at getting some data or whatnot, and just processing each one as they came through that way.
Do you remember where you were when you learned that you guys might have a suspect and he's in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I will remember that day for a very long time. I was here working at the police department, and my role during the investigation was primarily in communications. The second day of this incident, the prior chief delegated me as the public information officer, so I took that role on as a primary, in addition to my other duties as the services commander. We worked very closely with the investigators, certainly on the status of the case. And so when we learned that we had a potential suspect, it was exciting.
I bet. And then when you find out how they got him, as far as tying it to the case, what was your thought knowing that, the DNA tracing him to the garbage can and all that, that maybe, 15, 20 years ago, that technology may not have been able to do that, even sooner than that, actually.
Yeah, it actually was a huge piece of evidence, certainly in this case. Our investigators have continually said that we believe even if we didn't have that DNA evidence, that we were on the right track and we would have eventually found him either way. However, that certainly was a gigantic piece of evidence that led us to him quickly, or much more quickly than the other potential routes. So it was wonderful to have that. When we learned that we had all those puzzle pieces coming together, one of the last pieces of the puzzle was the DNA match. It just all started to make sense. And so it really picked up steam and we moved forward very quickly.
Do you believe that there might be still more evidence out there that hasn't been found or will never be found?
Well, certainly. I mean, this case, we never found the weapon that was utilized, the knife that was utilized. So that is somewhere in existence. And I don't know if we'll ever find it. Certainly, if we get any kind of information where we could follow up and try to find that item, we would love to do that. But other than that, yeah, I don't know if we're going to have much else to go on.
Do you think there may have been another knife too?
All the evidence showed from the investigation that we were dealing with one singular knife.
Okay, one singular weapon.
Mm-hmm.
When you learned that he wanted to do a plea agreement, what was your thought at that moment?
Yeah, just in my experience in law enforcement, I always know that is a possibility in any case, those things to come up. In this particular case, as we got closer and closer to trial, that the idea of that happening was beginning to fade in my mind. But when I heard that was on the table and that things were progressing in that way, it's especially the way that it ended. Correct. I mean, he pled guilty to all charged counts. There was no bargaining. There was no. The only thing that was taken off the table was the death penalty. And quite frankly, as Prosecutor Bill Thompson has said, in a way, he still got the death penalty because now he will spend the rest of his life and he will die in prison. And so, as far as an outcome goes, I was very much in support of it.
And the fact that it doesn't drag on through decades of appeals, I imagine too, is kind of appealing in a way.
Certainly, because we all understand that that is the typical route that even death penalty cases go. Is it can be decades, if not the rest of their natural life, in appeals anyway. And so it could be mistrials, there could be additional trials. That means that all of the work has to be done multiple times. So yes, this is definitely an outcome that I was okay with.
Chief, this is kind of a broad question, but how's the community doing? I mean, from 3, 4 years ago to today.
Well, I mean, this is a scar that'll never heal. It'll be a part of our history forever. I don't think it'll define us by any means, but it definitely hit home. We are a smaller town. We're a smaller agency. We're a pretty tight knit community, and all in all, I think it did. It unified us and it made us stronger. Throughout this investigation, I've said it before that the support from the community was amazing. While the greater world was maybe not looking on us in the most favorable light, our community here in Moscow had our backs, and they were supportive, and they were giving us phone calls and letters and endless streams of food to the police department that all of our investigators were able to just go downstairs, and there was always food in our break room. They could grab a bite to eat and get right back to work. It very much lifted our spirits and helped us keep moving forward. So my hope is now that this is relatively over, that we can all begin to heal a little bit and just continue to move on, but we'll always remember it.
For other police agencies that are about your size, smaller agencies that might be somewhere in the world, if something like this, heaven forbid, hopefully it doesn't, happens to them though, what advice would you give to that chief? If they get thrown in a big story, a big case, what would you tell him or her?
Yeah, my advice would be to cast that net for assistance far and wide, right out the gate. Don't wait. It is much easier to have all the resources come in and begin working on things and then start parsing those down or paring those down as needed versus trying to ask for aid the further that you get along. So cast that net for aid wide and far initially.
And again, my thanks to the chief for chatting with me. I can't imagine, I should say, about what this does to a tiny police department like Moscow. So I want to jump from there over to the Attorney General's office in Boise. Jeff Nye is the head of the criminal division, I should say, and he played a very active role in this case, particularly preparing briefs ahead of the trial. For instance, the change of venue briefs, all the stuff about the DNA and why the DNA should be allowed in. Do you remember how the defense fought to have that evidence admitted? The DNA that was found on the knife sheath that matched Kohberger's father, that they then got a sample from the garbage can and they were able to track it to Bryan Kohberger. The defense said that was unconstitutional, that it shouldn't be allowed in. And if the judge would have ruled yes to that, that would have been a major blow. That the whole case hinged on that. Well, maybe I shouldn't say hinged. That was central to the case. If you lose that, the case is blown. And so Jeff Nye, here in a minute, you're going to hear from him. He is the investigator, the attorney at the Attorney General's office who helped prepare those documents. And I began by asking him flat out, like, what is the Attorney General's office involvement in these type of cases? Because we know they got involved with Daybell. Do you remember that? The first prosecutor in Fremont asked the AG to take it over, and the Attorney General did it 100%. Then when the new prosecutor, Lindsay Blake, got elected, she asked for the case back. It went back to Lindsay, and then the Attorney General worked with her hand in hand and did the case. So, we talked about that and a whole lot more. Here is my interview with Jeff Nye. So, Jeff, I want to get started by asking you about the role the Attorney General's office played in the Kohberger investigation, but also maybe other investigations, because a lot of people might not understand where you guys come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the way it's set up in Idaho, our system is that the local county prosecuting attorney is responsible for prosecuting all crime within their county. The Attorney General has limited jurisdiction over specific subject matter areas. For example, we have our Internet Crimes Against Children unit, and so we can both investigate and prosecute those crimes. But the vast majority of crimes, murder, for example, is handled by the local county prosecuting attorney. And our office gets involved only upon request of the prosecuting attorney. And that can either be in a request to take over the case, or like it was in this case with Kohberger, to just step in and assist and provide some supplemental resources so the county can continue handling the case.
I see. So Latah County reaches out to your office and says, we need some help. And was that mainly with the actual preparation for trial?
So it actually wasn't so much focused on the trial as it was on the legal briefing and argument before the court. And really, in this case, the way it played out, the current Attorney General, Raul Labrador, came into office in January of 2023. And when he first came into office, he gave me a list of 3 or 4 topics that he wanted to be briefed on related to criminal law. And one of them was this case. And when we met, his question was, what can we do to help? Is there anything our office can do to help? And so I explained that at the time, our office under the previous Attorney General would not agree to step in and assist county prosecutors. We would only take the case over. So it was a take it or leave it approach. And I explained to the Attorney General that I thought we could do more than that, and that I thought we could and should offer to assist in the right circumstances. And so shortly after that, it's my understanding that the Attorney General reached out to Bill Thompson and said, we're here for you, we support you, whatever help you need, whatever you want that to look like, we're happy to help you. And then it was in March or April that Bill Thompson called me and requested that help. And
I see.
It started with a request to help with the grand jury. And then once we got through that, our role really kind of organically became, we did a lot of the brief writing and legal argument in front of the court.
Okay. So that can help paint the picture as to your involvement in the hearings and the written documents leading up through those hearings. What were the type of things that your office was assigned? Like, were there particular areas that you're like, all right, we have this and Latah can do this, or was it kind of just as things would come in, filings from the defense that you would work on? How did it work?
So it was all under the leadership of Bill Thompson. He was the one that was assigning out who would do what. But again, kind of organically, the way that it played out, our office took over anything that was really focused more on the law and less maybe on the specific facts of the case, because we weren't there for the investigation like Bill was. And so some of the topics that we handled were, after there was an indictment, they moved to dismiss that indictment, and we handled the briefing and argument on that. We handled the change of venue. We handled my personal role, my biggest role probably in the case, was handling all of the briefing and argument related to investigative genetic genealogy. That was a new issue in Idaho, and so it was a pretty big deal. And so Bill asked me to kind of step in and take that on. And then we handled the slew of motions that were filed to try and strike the death penalty as well.
Wow, those are some pretty big areas there. I want to ask you about the genetic genealogy stuff. Tell me how critical that information was to this case.
So the way I would say it is, it was essential to the case. I think something you need to understand about the investigative genetic genealogy is this was an issue of first impression in Idaho. So no court had addressed a constitutional challenge to the use of investigative genetic genealogy. And when the defense moved for that in this case, everyone understood that what they were seeking was to try and keep the DNA out of the trial. But I don't know that everyone fully understood that the way the Fourth Amendment works, if the state were to lose that argument, you don't just lose the evidence itself, you lose anything that came from that evidence. You may have heard the phrase fruit of the poisonous tree. And in this case, because the investigative genetic genealogy is how they identified the defendant, that would have meant virtually everything. The stakes couldn't have been higher with respect to the evidence pointing to the defendant. If you watch, when I did the oral argument in that, Judge Hippler, his very last question to me was, Mr. Nye, if the FBI did in fact violate Mr. Kohberger's constitutional rights, you would agree that that would burden the state, is the way he phrased it. And what I understood him to be asking, and what I believe he was asking was, you agree with me that if I find that this was a violation of the Constitution, you lose everything, pointing to the defendant. And I said yes. So that the stakes were pretty high on that one.
That huge.
Yes.
So just to summarize, in case people missed that part of the build up to the trial, is the defense was saying that the DNA, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, was obtained illegally or unconstitutionally. Therefore, it should not be admitted as evidence. The prosecution, your team, was saying it should be admitted as evidence that it was constitutional in the way that they obtained it, and the judge did end up letting it in. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. And when you say the way they obtained it, we're talking, they had several different arguments along the path. But yes, they were arguing about the way they found him was the DNA that was on the knife sheath. There was single source male DNA. They didn't have anyone they could connect to that DNA, so they didn't have anyone to test to compare it to. Traditionally, when you're doing DNA testing in the criminal world, you have an individual, you have the DNA from the item, and you can compare those two things. Here they had DNA, but they didn't have the individual. So how do you find them? Well, that's where investigative genetic genealogy comes in. And they literally they reverse engineer a genetic family tree to figure out who could this person be. And then they get a warrant to arrest that person. Now they have the person and they can compare it to the DNA. And so because that's the way they used to find the defendant in this case, all of the evidence was fruit of those actions. And so, again, if we had lost that motion, it would have been devastating to the case.
Well, and not only this case, but in future cases, right? Couldn't future cases point to this one as precedent and say it wasn't allowed in then, it shouldn't be allowed in now?
Absolutely. From a legal perspective as well, it was a really big deal to set the legal landscape on, is investigative genetic genealogy going to be allowed in Idaho's court system? There
So
are
we're,
other.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there are other courts in other states that have addressed it. Not very many at this point, but it has been addressed. But this was the first time that it was addressed in an Idaho court. Is Judge Hippler's well written decision?
Yeah. Were you nervous going in for that argument and preparing the brief?
Yeah, I was. I'm always a little bit nervous when I argue. I think on this one, I was very confident in our legal position. We stand by the technique. We stand by law enforcement using that technique. It is constitutional, but when the stakes are as high as they are, then yeah, I'm always a little bit nervous about it.
You mentioned the change of venue being one of the other issues your office dealt with. Why was that so important to move the trial so far from where the crimes happened?
Yeah, the change of venue was an interesting issue in this case. I think everybody watching kind of had an intuitive sense of why you may want to move it. These horrific crimes affected the community directly there. There were students at the University of Idaho, which is a big part of the community there. And so the defense's argument was, in order to get a fair jury, we need to move this. And the state's position wasn't full disagreement with that. The state's position was, we should try to seat a jury and see if we can get one. And if not, then we can change venue. But ultimately, the judge decided, let's just go ahead and change it to be safe. And that's why it was moved to Ada County.
Over all the months and months you spent working on this, what would you say is the biggest surprise that you found?
The biggest surprise, I would say, would be the guilty plea at the end. I think that was a surprise for me. Now, you have to understand the role that we were playing in the case again. Latah County was making all of the decisions, and they were the ones who were engaging with the defense team. I wasn't involved in those conversations, but I was consulted, I guess you would say, on my thoughts and opinions and other things. And so I wasn't shocked in the sense that at the change of plea hearing, I knew what was going to be happening. But leading up to that, uh, every indication I had seen and believed was that the defendant had no interest in pleading guilty and wanted a trial and believed that he could be vindicated at that trial. That was just kind of my assumptions and reading the tea leaves, if you will. And so that, I would say, that was probably the biggest surprise, that that's how it ended.
Yeah, I think it was a surprise for many, many people. Do you think it was because all of these motions against the defense came down against them leading up to trial? Do you think that that maybe put pressure on, Bryan Kohberger to take a plea agreement?
I do think that that is at least part of the calculation. I can't in any way speak to his motivations or why he decided at the end. Obviously, I've never spoken to him about it. I don't know why his attorneys, what they advised, if anything. So anything it's kind of just speculation on my part. But absolutely, I think one of the reasons that they bring challenges to things like the death penalty is to try and chip away at as much as they can from the state side, and any leverage that the state would have. And so, yeah, I mean, that the way you resolved this was by giving up the death penalty in exchange for guilty pleas to everything in the indictment and maximum penalties on every charge. And so at the end of the day, protecting the death penalty meant something to that resolution.
I want to ask you, and I don't know if you're the one that would be able to speak to this, or it might be somebody else. But from what we understand, the plea agreement was no appeals. He can't appeal. But Judge Hippler mentioned that he had I think 42 days or something if he wanted to appeal, but then said that if he did, it might void the plea agreement. Can you explain that? Because I know a lot of our viewers were confused when the judge said, "Oh, you do have a certain amount of time to appeal."
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm more than happy to handle this. And I just for a little bit of background, I guess, for the viewers, in our division, in the criminal law division, I also supervise the appellate unit, and they handle all criminal appeals in the state of Idaho. And so, if there were to be an appeal, it would come to our office, and we would be the ones handling it. So that's kind of the background I'm coming from on this. So, Judge Hippler was getting at a couple of different things. Let me start with the appeal waiver itself. It's not uncommon when a defendant pleads guilty to waive their appellate rights, and that's typically how it's phrased in the plea agreement. But what we know, and there's actually a case on this that came out of Idaho and was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court called Garza v. Idaho, is that a criminal defendant cannot actually waive all of their appellate rights. There is a narrow category of issues that you cannot waive. And really what that's focused on is the validity of the waiver itself. So while in this case, the defendant waived his appellate rights, that means he waived his right to challenge things like the change of venue, the IGG, motion to suppress, the challenge that he raised to the indictment. He doesn't get to challenge any of those. But what he can't waive is an attack on the validity of the plea agreement itself. And so he could raise a challenge. For example, he could claim that his attorney provided him ineffective assistance in advising him on the plea agreement. And if he were to win that, it would have to be that the court finds that he didn't enter that plea knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. And so no matter what language you put in the plea agreement, you just cannot waive that. So that's part of what Judge Hippler was referring to. Then there's the second part you mentioned where Judge Hippler did make a comment about by filing a notice of appeal, you may actually violate your plea agreement. That one I personally would consider a little bit more of an open issue as to whether or not that's something that the state could argue, that just by filing the notice of appeal, we could argue, well, now he's violated the plea agreement, so we want to go back, we want our trial, and we want to impose the death penalty. I guess we would just have to see how that one plays out if it came up.
I see. But if for some reason he does decide to appeal, as with all other cases, it does end up in your office.
Absolutely, it would. Yes, and another part to understand about waivers of any kind or appellate waivers, the court clerk at the Idaho Supreme Court is not going to refuse to accept an appeal from him just because he's waived it.
Yeah.
You can really, as I've learned in my job, you can really file just about anything that you want to. The question is just, are you going to get anywhere with it? So let's say that the defendant here, Mr. Kohberger, decides to appeal and challenge the IGG ruling. Well, the response, he would be allowed to file that. The court's not going to stop him. But the response from our office would be to file a motion to dismiss that appeal, and we would cite to the plea agreement and say, he's waived this. And I'm confident that in that situation, the court would just dismiss the appeal.
I see. So it's going to be, if should that happen, it's going to be much quicker than some of these other cases, like the Daybell cases or whatever, that take years to work their way through the courts.
Absolutely. And even in that narrow category that I talked about of if he tried to challenge the validity of the plea agreement itself, even in that area, it's a very narrow area. And so it's not going to last for years and years. And if you watched the change of plea hearing, you saw how careful Judge Hippler was in asking all of those questions that I think for a lot of lay people sound very repetitive. And you almost start rolling your eyes like, is he seriously asking that question again? But it's because he needs to be thorough so that the record is accurate that no, he was in fact entering this plea of his own free will. There was no improper influences on him. And so if Mr. Kohberger were to raise that challenge now, we have that change of plea hearing transcript we can rely on to say he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that explanation. There were so many people that were quite pleased or happy that this was a plea agreement, that the trial didn't happen, that he goes away, we don't hear about him. There were a few others that weren't, including one of the family members of the victims, and others that are saying they want the full story. They want it all to come out about what exactly happened and where evidence might be and maybe a motive would come out. Do you think we will ever get all of that versus had there been a trial?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because it's something that I've seen being talked about on social media and other places. And one of the criticisms that I've seen of Bill agreeing to accept these guilty pleas is exactly that well, we want to find out what happened. But had this gone to trial, you would not have found that out. The public would not have found that out. There is no circumstance in which the defendant agrees to take the stand at his own trial and explain to the jury why he did something that he's trying to argue to them he didn't do at all. So you're not going to get it from him at the trial. You would just be relying on the evidence being presented by the state. And Bill Thompson has been very clear about what that evidence does and does not show. And as you heard, if you saw the press conference immediately after the sentencing, Bill, the lead investigators, they all confirmed we don't have evidence showing a motive. And so had this gone to trial, there wouldn't somehow magically be new evidence that would suddenly explain why this happened. So to the extent, I understand that people have different feelings about the way that this case ended, but I don't think it's a fair criticism to say we would have learned more had this gone to trial. If anything, we would have learned less, because you also wouldn't have the defendant saying in his own words that he did this, that he's guilty of it. So,
Yeah. Uh, Having had this major case with international attention coming on the heels of the two Daybell cases last year and the year before, I mean, what has this been like for your office?
so we were involved in the Daybell cases actually pretty early on. It was a little bit before my time in that particular unit. But then the cases were given back, and you know this history better than I do, but the cases were given back to Lindsay Blake in Fremont County and to Rob Wood in Madison County. And our office then didn't get involved again until the Daybell trial. One of our deputy attorneys general from our office helped at that trial. Ingrid Beatty agreed to go and help them. And, that was chronologically, that came after we had agreed to assist Bill in this case. But it was yet another example of where I believe the Attorney General's office can play a role in cases, even where the county prosecuting attorney wants to hold on to it and be the lead attorney. I think Ingrid did a phenomenal job in that case at trial and helping them present evidence the way that they did. Obviously, that ended in a conviction and getting the death penalty. So the other way that I like to look at it in the role that I'm in is all of these cases, as we've kind of touched on, will eventually make their way to our office, whether we're assisting the county prosecutor or not. We're going to be handling the appeals. And then if it goes on to federal court and federal habeas, that's our office too. And so my view of it is not only are we able to step in and help out the county prosecuting attorney, but by doing that, we can ensure that the record that we are arguing later on the appeal is as good as it can possibly be with the assistance of our office.
Yeah. Jeff, thank you very much. Is there anything that you want to add?
I would just say, I think in this case, obviously a horrific case, the biggest case I think Idaho's ever seen, hopefully ever will see, at least of this nature. It was a real privilege to work with Bill Thompson. I'm glad that our office had the opportunity to do that. Bill is somewhat of a legend in the prosecutor community here in Idaho. Before I got on the case, I didn't know Bill. I hadn't met him personally. All I really knew about him is I had heard that he was highly ethical and he had a reputation for being the only prosecutor in Idaho who had gotten a murder conviction without the body, which is a pretty big deal. And so I was very optimistic. I think that it worked out really well, and I was grateful for that opportunity. And then last, most importantly, I just wanted, since this is probably the only public time I'll speak about this case, my heart goes out to the victims in this case and the people who were affected. I think sitting through that sentencing hearing was an honor for me. It was a privilege to listen to the victims express how this terrible, terrible thing, how he had affected them. And it was great to see such a wide variety of emotion and responses, but in their individual way, every one of them was brave and powerful in expressing that. And it was just an honor to be there and a privilege to work on this case. And I do hope that this ending allows them to find some form of closure and that they can move on to the extent that's possible in a situation like this.
It's amazing to me how all of these agencies can come together and pull off such a phenomenal job when they do these type of major, major cases. And the world is watching and scrutinizing and paying attention to every single little thing. And when it comes to justice and when it comes to lives that are on the line, you have to be so careful about every little thing. And so again, my thanks to Jeff Nye for chatting with me. And I want to thank newspapers.com. Now, if you are into the Kohberger case, which I'm sure you are, you've got to go check out, they have a special page, the Idaho Murders page. Here it is. In fact, I'm going to make this full screen. They have compiled all sorts of stuff. You can listen to Idaho student murder analysis. By the way, newspapers.com is our sponsor for Courtroom Insider. So shouting them out. Newspapers.com/Idaho Murders will get you there. There's key facts about the victims, the location, the time, the discovery, the murder weapon, arrest and evidence. There's unanswered questions. There's a who's who. You've got a timeline here. You've got the original story from Rebecca Boone from the AP. I remember that day so well. I'll pull it up here on my screen here. You can scroll through and look at all of the different newspaper coverage. Again, the analysis. Newspapers.com is a great resource if you're into learning more about the Kohberger case. Newspapers.com/Idaho Murders. You can also check out the other stuff that's on their website about other cases. About if you go up here, they have it's the Crime Home. They've got JonBenet Ramsey. You've got Crime Connections, Crime Trivia, Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short, known as Black Dahlia, was found brutally murdered in the Lemhart Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. I don't even know this case. The horrific mutilation imposing of her body sparked a media frenzy. Despite a large investigation and numerous suspects, the Black Dahlia murder remains an infamous unsolved case in LA true crime history. Anyway, it's all on there. Thank you, newspapers.com. And thank you for watching. Let me get to your shout outs and questions. Thanks for Peggy for showing us around and helping gather all of these. Here we go. Bill and Nancy in Mission Viejo, California. We've been huge fans since the very beginning of your Daybell Vallow coverage. We never miss a Courtroom Insider. Love your insights, relatable style, and compassion for the victims. Thank you, Bill and Nancy. Thanks for watching. Mary Berry. Is that your real name? Because I love it. Lee Wills, Lori Burrow, Ron Bacher, Jolene Reed, Stacy Simmons, and Jody Lund. Thank you all very much for watching. We have people watching in Hendersonville, North Carolina, New Zealand, Grand Haven, Michigan, North Carolina, Italy, Chester, Idaho. I've been to Chester. South of France. Wow. Germany, Fort Lauderdale, Sweden, Pocatello, and Provo. Thank you all very much for watching and enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it. That's what I meant to say. Let me head out to our questions now. Nate, I just got done watching Lori's sentencing and two questions struck me. One, in her statement to the court, she thanked her paralegal investigator and two advisory attorneys. Any idea how in the world she had the resources to pay for these people for their time? I can't imagine they did it for free, but who knows? She didn't pay for it, and they didn't do it for free. They were hired by the state. So she was given the defense team. The state pays for it. The taxpayers pay for it, and they're given X amount of hours. If they go over their hours, they can't have contact with her, or they shouldn't. So the investigator was paid to do his job to assist in her defense. So was her paralegal, and so were the two attorneys. Now that they're no longer part of her team, I doubt she has any contact with them any further. So that's how she did it. Nate, did I hear correctly that Kay mentioned in her statement that Lori was an extra on Modern Family? I had never heard that before. Is it true? It is true. In fact, I think on Reddit, there's a picture. Someone sent me a clip. I don't have it anymore, but let me see where it's at. Okay, I know it's on there. Okay, yeah, the Sun, the U.S. Sun did a story about it. Here we go. See right here, there's Lori in this picture. If I click on it, oh yeah, there we go. So that's Lori Vallow. And Colby Ryan posted a YouTube video entitled "That Time I Was on Modern Family." There's Lori, there's Colby, there's Tylee, and there's JJ, of course. So yeah, she was on Modern Family. I didn't see the episode, but she was there. I have a question. Judge Boreski approved no contact injunctions protecting Charles's and Brandon's family. Do you know if Lori has tried to contact them? Are they in place as a precaution? As far as I know, she has not tried to contact them. She has had no contact with any of them. She has not tried to apologize. She has not written them letters or anything like that. I think it's in place as a precaution, more as a place of security. Sometimes people will go to prison and they'll harass the victims. Someone asked me, what happens if she violates it? I don't know. I mean, what are they going to do? I guess you could tell the mail carrier to not deliver any mail. And if she calls, try to block the number. But it's more on the record. She cannot contact them at all. Nate, is Lori going to appeal in Arizona? And how is her Idaho appeal going? Her Idaho appeal going, so her team in Idaho filed the first set of appeal documents. Now the state will respond, and then her team can respond, and they can go back and forth until it's ready, as far as I know. Then the Idaho Supreme Court will hear the case. And that will be different than like having Judge Boreski or Judge Boyce on the bench. It will be the Supreme Court justices, where each side, I think, gets 20 minutes. Lori won't be there, and they'll argue why it should be appealed. Remember, they're talking technicalities here. They're going to argue that the judge improperly severed the case. I don't remember all the reasons. I did a whole video on it. You can watch it on our YouTube channel. It's on there all about her appeal. But that's the status there, and I imagine she will appeal in Arizona. As far as I know, I have not seen any documents that she's filed it yet. I think she has, I don't know what the judge say. A certain amount of time she has to file it by. Nate, can you please ask Judge Boreski his thoughts about this case? I'd be curious to know what's going on in his head. This surely had to take a toll on him. I'd love to. Judges, though, don't talk about cases until maybe they retire, because if Judge Boreski came out did some sort of news conference or interview and talked about the case, then it could affect the appellate process. Now, can judges talk to the media? Yeah, they can. And I've interviewed some. I've interviewed multiple judges. In fact, I've talked with many judges off the record or on background that help me understand cases in a way. And then some have actually gone on camera and talked about the legal processes, about themselves, their lives, things like that. But they won't talk about their current cases. Okay, Nate, can Kohberger file appeals now? I think we talked about that with Jeff Nye a minute ago about the appellate process. He kind of discussed that, so I hope that answered your question. If given a chance, what would you ask Kohberger? I'd ask where the knife is. I'd ask why. That's the first thing. Why them? Was there one target? There's a lot I'd ask him. The question is, would he answer? And would he answer honestly? And if he answers, do you believe his answers? Sometimes criminals are brutally, brutally honest. And sometimes they lie. Every other word, you don't know what to believe. So that might be the case. Nate, are you listening or watching any true crime podcasts or documentaries? We are about to go on a road trip and I'd love some suggestions. Oh, that's a good question. Those of you watching, leave your suggestions in the comments if you have some good ones. I just started this morning when I was at the gym listening to the documentary on Hulu called, it's about the news anchor who vanished years ago. Let me pull it up. It's called, it's loading. She was the morning anchor and was on her way to work when she vanished. And she never showed up to her last broadcast is what it's called. The abduction of Jody Houston Trout. So Houston Trout. And this happened in the 90s. Morning show anchor is late for work. Producer calls, says, you got to get here. She says, I'm on my way, and never shows up. And that body's never been found. Listening to that, podcast-wise, I am listening to season 2 of The Retrievals, which I've just gotten into. Season 1 was all about women who were going in to deliver or for treatment, and they were in horrible pain. And I don't want to give too much away. It was fascinating. Season 2 is about C-sections. It's not really true crime per se. At least I'm not there if someone is committing crimes. I'm only on episode 1. And then I listened to Bone Valley. Holy smokes. You got to listen to Bone Valley. And the guy's going to be at CrimeCon. Season 1 and season 2. That was one I binged. And that was such a good podcast. True Bone Valley, the journalist and the guy who's at the center of the story will both be at CrimeCon. And by the way, if you're going to be at CrimeCon in Denver, I'd love to meet you. We're doing 2 panels, one with Marsha Clark. I'm just finishing the presentation. Hope to finish next week. It's going to be so good. I'm not bragging about myself. I'm saying Marsha's going to be so good. And then we have one with Colby and with Ray Hermosillo. And that one's going to be really, really, really excellent too. If you're on the edge, you don't know whether to go or not, you can use the promo code EATON, EATON, and that will give you 10% off a standard badge. And we are doing a meet and greet. I don't know if I can announce that yet, but we are. So come and meet me, Colby, Hermosillo. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, so those are kind of the podcasts I'm listening to, but I'm always looking for suggestions if you have any. Nate, I hope you plan to take some time off. You seem tired and run down. Oh, well, thanks. I guess I am tired and run down. I'm feeling better today, but I am taking tomorrow off, at least part of the day. And I have some stuff coming up here in the next few weeks that I'll be here and there. But just know the Courtroom Insider won't take time off. And we have some fun stuff coming up, some exciting stuff to tell you about down the line, and some other stories that we hope to bring you. So I think we're good for tonight, though. I think it's time for me to get home and go to bed. I want to thank you all for watching. Oh, and side note, we're going to put one of these studios at my house, so then I can go live from my house. How's that? We can do Courtroom Insider all the time. Just kidding. And Erica can be involved. What do you think? Should Erica be here more? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. I just want to thank you for watching. Here's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube, East Idaho News. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching, please subscribe. That helps us. And hit the bell so you can get notified when we're going to go live. And we'd love it. We'd really love it if you haven't subscribed to do so. Hope to see you next week on Courtroom Insider. Next Thursday, we'll be back with another episode. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton. Take care.